There are two kinds of older sisters in the world. The kind who call you first and the kind who make decisions and tell you afterward and then act confused when you don't smile and say thank you. Mine was the second kind. I was 23 years old the spring she announced the date, and I had already paid the deposit. My name is Adriana Vasquez. I was 23 that April, living in a two-bedroom apartment on Heller Street in Columbus, Ohio, working 32 hours a week at a dental office on the east side of town, and raising my daughter Marisol mostly on my own. Marisol was turning 4 on April 19th. She had been talking about her birthday since January. She wanted pink balloons, a chocolate cake with strawberries on top, and her grandmother's tamales. Those were the three things. She told me every single morning for 3 months. Not all three every morning. Just whichever one she was thinking about when she woke up. I had been planning the party since March. The community hall at the Eastfield Recreation Center cost $180 for a 4-hour block on a Saturday afternoon. I put down the $90 deposit on March 7th. I had a list on the Notes app on my phone. 31 names. Family, my coworker Denise from the dental office, 3 neighbors from our building whose kids played with Marisol on the shared lawn out back, and my grandmother Lupe, who lived 40 minutes away in Westerville and had not missed a single one of Marisol's birthdays since the day she was born. Lupe came the first year with a handmade blanket and a pot of beans and sat in my apartment for 6 hours holding Marisol while I slept. That kind of grandmother. The paper invitations were written. I had already bought the craft paper and the markers from the dollar store on Franklin Avenue. I had confirmed with my neighbor Dolores that she would bring balloons. Pink, as requested. I want to tell you about the phone call first because it changes the shape of everything that comes after. My older sister Renata is 31. She and her husband Patricio have a daughter named Sophia, who is also turning 4 in April 26th, exactly 1 week after Marisol. Sophia and Marisol share a birthday month. They share grandparents. They share a family. What they do not share and have never really shared is equal weight in how our family arranges itself around them. Renata has always been our mother's first call. When Renata was pregnant with Sophia, my mother flew to Columbus for 3 weeks, made food, cleaned the apartment, kept Renata company in the evenings. When I was pregnant with Marisol, my mother sent a card and called on Sundays. When Renata found the apartment on the good side of town with the parking garage and the updated kitchen, my father took a full weekend off work to help her move. When I moved to Heller Street, I rented a van with Denise and her boyfriend, and we did it in a day. I don't say this to make you feel sorry for me. I say it because you need the map of the territory to understand what followed. Renata is not a cruel person. That is the thing that is hardest to explain to people who haven't lived inside this particular kind of family. She does not think of herself as someone who takes up more space than she deserves. She thinks of herself as the firstborn who does things properly, the one who calls mom on Sunday mornings, who shows up to every family gathering with a dish that required actual effort, who manages the logistics of family events because, as she has said out loud more than once, someone has to. She loves me. She does. She loves me the way people love things they feel gently, permanently responsible for. Not the way you love an equal. The way you love something slightly smaller than yourself that you feel vaguely protective of and never think to consult. I think if I am honest about it now, that underneath all of that, Renata was afraid of me. Not in a way she could have named. But I think she had watched me, in the years after Marisol was born, the years when I learned how to manage $1,847 a month and still keep the lights on, and still pack a lunch the night before, and still show up to work at 8 a.m. on 4 hours of sleep and do good work. And I think she had seen something in all of that quiet competence that made her move first. The way people do when they sense that the gap between themselves and someone else is closing. So she made decisions that assumed I would follow. She arranged things and left a space for me that was already shaped before I arrived. She had been doing it in small ways my whole life. The party was just the most visible version. The call came on a Tuesday evening, March 14th. I had just put Marisol to sleep and was eating leftover rice standing over the kitchen sink when my phone lit up with Renata's name. "Hey," she said. "So, I've been talking to Mom, and we all think it makes sense to do the girls' birthdays together this year. We already booked the Sunridge room at the Holiday Inn on April 19th. Mom's doing the cake." I stood holding my fork. That's Marisol's actual birthday, I said. I know. That's why we picked it. It makes more sense to celebrate both girls on the real date. Sophia's is close enough. Renata, I said. I already booked a hall. There was a pause. Not long. Oh, she said. Well, cancel it. This is better. The Sunridge room fits 60 people. It'll be nicer for both girls. Both girls, I said. Yes. They can share. It'll be sweet. I said, I'll think about it. She said, what's there to think about? We assumed you'd just come to ours. It makes the most sense. I did not answer that. I'll talk to you later, I said. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. I stood there for a while. The rice was cold. The light in the kitchen buzzed the way it always did after 9 p.m. I could hear the upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling, low voices, and the periodic sound of recorded laughter. Outside in the parking lot, a car was idling. I will think about it, I had said, but I already knew. I pulled up the Eastfield Recreation Center number on my phone. I called and confirmed the booking. I paid the remaining $90 balance on my debit card right there at the counter with the cold rice still in the pot. I did it so there would be nothing left to cancel. The next morning I drove to work on Route 33 with Marisol's party list still open in my notes app. I added 4 more names on my lunch break. That evening, after Marisol was asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table with the craft paper and the markers, and I wrote out 35 invitations by hand. I did not use the word birthday on a single one. I wrote, you are invited to celebrate Marisol Vasquez on Saturday, April 19th. I wrote the address of the Eastfield Recreation Center. I wrote the time, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. I wrote my phone number at the bottom. I sealed each one in an envelope and wrote the address by hand in the same marker. I did not call Renata back. I did not tell my mother what I was doing. I mailed all 35 invitations the morning of March 16th on my way to work. The weeks between mailing the invitations and the day of the party were not dramatic. I want you to know that. There were no arguments. There were no confrontations in anyone's kitchen. Life continued in the ordinary way it does when you have a 4-year-old and a job and 32 hours a week on your feet cleaning teeth and making small talk with people who are half asleep in a reclined chair. Marisol went to daycare. I made lunches the night before. I drove home on Route 33 and listened to the same radio station every day because finding something different required more energy than I had. My mother called twice. The first call, she asked if I had confirmed with Renata yet. I told her I had my own plans, and they were set. She paused and said, Adriana, don't make this difficult. I told her I wasn't making anything difficult. I had a hall. It was paid for. There was a silence, and then she said she would talk to Renata. I said okay. The second call was 3 days before the party. My mother said she wasn't sure which event she was going to. She said it in the way she always delivers uncertain news, as a statement, not a question, as though she is informing you of something you are expected to simply absorb. I told her I understood. I told her that Marisol had specifically asked for her tamales. There was a long pause. I already told Renata I'd bring food to her event, my mother said. Okay, I said. Adriana. Mom, I'm not asking you to choose. I'm telling you what Marisol asked for. You can do what you want. I hung up and stood in the bathroom doorway, watching Marisol arrange her bath toys in a careful line along the edge of the tub. She put the rubber duck at the end and said, to no one in particular, the duck is the birthday one. I sat down on the edge of the tub. I pressed my palms flat against my knees. I looked at the duck. It was 11:23 p.m. I did not cry. I was not going to cry about a birthday party. I had a hall booked and a balance paid in full and 35 invitations already in the mail. I had confirmed with Dolores that she was bringing balloons and with Denise that she was bringing a sheet cake from the Kroger bakery, chocolate with strawberries on top, exactly what Marisol had requested. I had called my grandmother Lupe 2 weeks earlier, and she had said she would be there and that she would bring food. But sitting on the edge of that tub at 11:23 at night with the kitchen light still buzzing in the next room and my daughter already asleep and her duck at the end of the line, I felt something I had been holding at arm's length for a long time move closer. It was not grief. Exactly. It was older than grief. It was the particular exhaustion of having existed in a smaller category your whole life. In your own family, in the house you grew up in, at every table where decisions were made about holidays and events and who got what kind of attention, and understanding with a completeness you hadn't had before that the only way out of that category was to stop waiting to be moved up and to simply build the table yourself. I had built the table. It was a $180 community hall with folding chairs and a kitchen that smelled like industrial cleaner. I had built it anyway. I got up. I washed my hands. I turned off the bathroom light and went to bed. Some kindnesses are loans the lender forgets they're keeping. My mother and my sister had never counted the cost of what they withheld from me. But I had. And I was done keeping the ledger quietly. My grandmother Lupe called on Friday afternoon, the day before the party. I was in the parking lot of the dental office, still in my scrubs, keys in my hand, standing between my car and the one parked next to it. "Mija," she said, "I got your invitation." "I'm so glad," I said. "I also heard from your mother." I figured. "She told me there's another party." "There is," I said. "The Sunridge Room at the Holiday Inn. Renata booked it." Lupe was quiet for a moment. I could hear her in her kitchen, the faint sound of something ceramic on the stovetop. The radio, she kept on low-tuned to the Spanish station out of Westerville. "Which one do you want me at?" she said. I said, "I want you wherever you want to be, Grandma." "Truly." "That is not what I asked you." A sparrow landed on the parking barrier 2 spaces down and stayed there. "Marisol asked for your tamales," I said. "I heard my grandmother set something down on the counter." "I will be there at 1:30, she said. "I will need help carrying the pot." "I'll be in the parking lot," I said. Saturday, April 19th. I arrived at the Eastfield Recreation Center at 12:45 with 2 bags of decorations, a tablecloth I had bought at the dollar store, and a box of paper plates. My neighbor Dolores arrived at 1 o'clock with her daughter and 4 bags of pink balloons and her husband Ernesto, who immediately found the air pump in one of the bags and started inflating balloons without being asked. My coworker Denise arrived at 1:15 with the Kroger cake, chocolate with strawberries, exactly right, and a folding table she had borrowed from her church. My grandmother arrived at 1:30 exactly. I was in the parking lot. I carried the pot. By 2:15, there were 22 people in the hall. By 3 o'clock, there were 31. They came the way guests come when they actually want to be somewhere a little early, already talking before they had found a seat, filling the room with the specific noise of people who are genuinely glad to be in the same place at the same time. My uncle Rodrigo drove an hour and 40 minutes from Dayton and brought his wife and both his kids. My father's cousin Delia, whom I had not seen in 2 years, walked in with a wrapped gift and said, "I've been meaning to call you for months." My downstairs neighbor Pearl, who was 72 years old and had watched Marisol through her screen door approximately 300 times over the past 4 years, arrived with a card containing a $10 bill and 2 tamales standing at the counter and told my grandmother the recipe was the best she had tasted since her own mother's. My grandmother said the recipe was not a secret, and they stood there for 40 minutes comparing notes on masa. Denise's husband Carlos set up the music from his phone through a small Bluetooth speaker he had brought without being asked. There was a balloon arch. It was mostly pink. It listed a little to the left because Ernesto ran out of helium halfway through and switched to air, but Marisol did not care about the physics of balloon arches. Marisol wore a pink dress with a white sash that I had bought at the consignment shop on Broad Street for $8.50. She ran from the balloon arch to the cake table and back again for the better part of the afternoon. She climbed into Rodrigo's lap and then climbed out again. She showed Pearl the rubber duck she had brought in her small backpack and explained that it was the birthday duck. Pearl treated this information with full seriousness and asked several follow-up questions. At 3:15, Marisol stood on a folding chair while 31 people sang to her, and she blew out 4 candles on the first try without leaning forward, just pursing her lips from where she was standing and sending all 4 flames out in one breath. And then she looked at me with an expression of pure and total satisfaction that I will carry inside me for the rest of my life. At 4:17, my phone buzzed on the table beside my paper plate. It was Renata. "Where is everyone? This can't be right." I read it. I set the phone face down on the table. Dolores was asking me whether we should cut the second layer of cake or save it. I told her to cut it. We cut it. At 4:22, there was a second message. Mom only just got here. Tio Rodrigo never came. What did you do? I looked at the text for a moment. Then I looked up at the room. 33 people, because 2 more had arrived in the last half hour. My grandmother at the far end of the table in deep conversation with Pearl about masa ratios. Marisol on Ernesto's shoulders in the pink dress, one hand gripping his hair, the other hand holding a piece of cake. Rodrigo's kids running between the folding chairs. Delia in animated conversation with 2 of our cousins I hadn't seen since a family reunion 4 years ago. I put the phone in my bag. I picked up my fork. I ate a piece of chocolate cake with strawberries on top. Renata called that evening at 7:40. I had just dropped my grandmother at her car in the lot and helped Dolores carry the deflated balloon bags to the recycling bin. Marisol was asleep in the back seat of my car, still in the pink dress with the white sash, one shoe off, one shoe on, the birthday duck tucked under her arm. I answered. You knew, Renata said. Her voice was controlled. Renata's voice is always controlled even when everything underneath it isn't. Knew what? I said. You knew people would have to choose. You set it up that way. I said, I planned a birthday party for my daughter. I sent invitations to people I love. I paid for a hall. That's all I did. Mom was 3 hours late. Rodrigo didn't come. Delia didn't come. Abuela never came. Her voice caught slightly on the last one. Just slightly. Abuela made her own choice, I said. You called her. She called me, actually. And I told her which event I was having. She decided. There was a pause long enough that I glanced at the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Sophia had a wonderful party, Renata said finally. Her voice had shifted. The control was still there, but it had thinned at the edges, the way paper thins when it gets wet. She had a beautiful day, and I am not going to let you take that from her. I didn't take anything from Sophia, I said. Her party happened. It sounds like it was beautiful. I'm glad. Don't do that. Do what? Be gracious about it. Like you're above it. I took a breath. I looked at Marisol in the rearview mirror. The pink dress, the duck, the absolute peace of a 4-year-old who had spent the afternoon being the center of 33 people's attention and then eaten cake and fallen asleep in a car seat. Renata, I said, I didn't call anyone and tell them not to come to your event. I didn't ask anyone to choose. I threw a party in my own name, for my own daughter, in a hall I paid for. The people who came to mine made their own choices. I can't be responsible for what those choices tell you. She didn't answer right away. You didn't tell me you were keeping the hall, she said, after I called. No, I said. I didn't. Why not? I thought about how to answer that. I thought about it carefully, the way I had learned to think about things in conversations with Renata, not rushing to the first true thing, but finding the true thing that was also fair. Because I knew what would happen if I did. I said. There would have been a reason for every argument I made. There would have been a better way, a more practical way, a why are you making this so hard way. And I was done making arguments. I just wanted my daughter to have a birthday party where she was the only birthday girl. That's it. That's the whole thing. There was a long silence. When Renata spoke again, her voice had changed in a way I hadn't heard before. Not softer, exactly. Smaller. More honest. I didn't think it was unfair, she said. When we planned it, I genuinely didn't think I was doing something unfair to you. I know, I said. I really didn't. I believe you, I said. And I did. That is the thing I need you to understand because it is the thing that took me the longest to understand myself. Renata did not invent the pattern we grew up inside. She was the one the pattern favored, which meant she never had to see it as a pattern at all. It was just the furniture of the room she had always lived in. The firstborn who gets called first, whose events are the anchor events, whose needs are the organizing needs, she had never been asked to see that from the outside because she had never been on the outside of it. The pattern was invisible to her the way water is invisible to the thing that lives inside it. And somewhere underneath all of that, I think, was fear. The slow closing of a gap she hadn't noticed opening. She had watched me do more with less for 4 years, and somewhere in her she understood what that meant. even if she couldn't name it. That I was not, in fact, smaller. That I had never been smaller. That I had just been behaving as though I was, because it was easier and less costly, and the habit of it had calcified over years into something that looked like personality. Fear is a thing that makes people move first. She had moved first, and it had not worked the way she thought it would. The girls should celebrate together sometime, I said. Not instead of their own parties. Together and also. Both things. A pause.
Yeah, she said.
Maybe. It wasn't a resolution, and I knew it wasn't a resolution. It was a door that had been sealed for a long time and was now open by an inch. An inch was enough for that evening in April. The week after the party, my grandmother called on a Tuesday evening. I was at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Marisol was at the kitchen table drawing with the new crayons Pearl had given her, 64 colors in a flat cardboard box, which Marisol had treated as a kind of inheritance. Mija, Lupe said, how are you feeling?
Good, I said.
Really good, actually. The party was wonderful. It was. Marisol was happy the whole time. She was. That's the whole point of it, my grandmother said. You know that, right? That is the whole entire point. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands on the dish towel with a small blue stripe that had been hanging on the oven handle for 3 years. Marisol was drawing something that appeared to be a person standing next to a very large duck. Both figures were wearing hats. I know, I said. I do know. My mother and I had a longer conversation the following month. She came to my apartment on a Saturday morning and I made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table and I said things I had been carrying for years with as much steadiness as I could find. It was painful in the particular way honest conversations with parents are painful when you have waited too long to have them, and both of you have to catch up at once.
She cried.
I did not. I told her I was not ending anything. I told her I needed her to understand that there were 2 daughters and that the way she had been doing things had not accounted for that in ways that had cost me for a long time. She said she knew that. I said I hoped so. She brought tamales that morning without being asked. She had made them herself. She set them on the counter in the pot, and she didn't make a production of it, and I didn't make a production of it, and we ate them for lunch with Marisol, who sat between us and told my mother, in complete seriousness, that the birthday duck's name was now Harold. My mother laughed. It was the first real laugh I had heard from her in years that wasn't performed for a room. Renata and I are fine. We are fine the way 2 people can be fine when something has been named between them that cannot be unnamed, and both of them have chosen, on balance, to stay in relationship anyway. Sophia and Marisol played together at Easter. They sat on the same bench and ate from the same platter and argued about a green crayon, and resolved it inside 3 minutes the way 4-year-olds do, because to a 4-year-old a disagreement is just weather. It arrives, it passes, it does not define the sky. I drove home from Easter with the windows down and Marisol asleep in her car seat and the radio playing low, and I thought about the Saturday in April, the haul that cost $180 and the tamales and the 33 people and the 4 candles blown out on the first try, and I thought, I built that. I built it with 35 handwritten envelopes and $8.50 and a list in my notes app and 1 phone call to a parking lot in Westerville. Nobody gave it to me.
Nobody had to.
I have thought about that spring more times than I can count. Not obsessively. Just the way you return to a moment that changed the direction of something important, the way you might look at a turn in a road and remember that before that turn you were going somewhere else entirely. Family without respect becomes entitlement, and entitlement grows teeth the moment you build something it cannot control. I built something it could not control. I did it quietly. I did it on behalf of a 4-year-old in a pink dress who wanted specific things and said so clearly every morning, that is not revenge. That is what happens when you stop asking permission to matter and start acting as though you already do. Forgiveness is not access. Understanding is not reunion. Compassion does not mean unlocking the door that took you years to close. I forgave Renata. I forgave my mother. I still have my own events and my own invitation lists and my own decisions about who to include and how. Those 2 things are not contradictions. You can hold love for people and still hold your own life separately. Love that demands you shrink is not love. It is management. And the moment you stop cooperating with it, the whole system has to reckon with itself. Some people only know how to love what they can control. Choosing to be uncontrollable is not cruelty. It is just the beginning of your actual life. Roles can be recast. The first person who needs to know you are done shrinking is not your sister or your mother or anyone at a table who has been counting on your smallness. It is you. Marisol is 5 now. She has already decided what she wants for her birthday next year. Purple cake this time. Her great-grandmother's tamales. The hall with the balloon arch but bigger balloons. She is very specific about the balloons. She wants them to be purple and very large, and she wants there to be a lot of them. She knows what she wants. She says it out loud in the morning before she is fully awake. She has never once apologized for wanting it. I did not teach her to apologize for that. That is the thing I am most proud of. If you have ever sat at a table where the price of admission was making yourself the smaller one, where your events were considered optional and your presence was assumed to be something that could be folded into someone else's arrangements without asking, I want you to think about what it would cost you to book a hall. Not instead of belonging to your family. In addition to it, your own hall, your own list, your own date. A place where you are the whole point, not a gracious addition to someone else's occasion. The two things are not the same. You are allowed to know the difference. You were always allowed to know the difference. Someone just forgot to tell you.